Hi, Shirley Chu here, and I want to talk to you about education reform. And the three areas I want to cover today are standardized testing, teacher evaluation, and core curriculum across the United States. So to begin with, let's talk about standardized testing. So the United States competes in the PISA, which is a program for international students assessment. Its inception is from 2000, and which the United States has taken part in. It is done every 3 years for students at the age of 15, covering contents areas of math, science, and reading. It tests the ability of students' acquired knowledge and skills to real-life experiences or real-life context. Now, ranking 25 overall is great out of 65 nations that compete. On the individual sections of the test, we ranked 36 in math, 28 in science, and 24 in reading, which is still not bad. But according to Jack Buckley, who is the Commissioner of National Center for Education Statistics, he says that we haven't changed in our score since 2003. We've kind of on a base. And Mark Tucker, head of Center for the Education and the Economy, says that we're studying these higher level countries that are making the grade at the top. For the past 25 years we've looked at them, and they would be the province of Shanghai, the Republic of Korea, and Japan. And we're finding that they're non-tradition bound, which means that they look at their programs and decide what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And then they seek to provide more resources for the harder to educate kids than the easier ones. But not by just providing more teachers, but providing better teachers. So that makes a difference in their educational programs. Now, let's also take a look at what Harvard professor Jan Rivkin has to say. He says that we haven't changed our reading since 2009. Our reading scores have stayed the same on this test. But the problem isn't that we're standing still. The problem is that the other runners are running faster. And while some of these nations are surpassing us, others are closing the gap. So we need to take a look at what we can do to change what's going on in these standardized testings so that we can raise our levels or our rankings. And just to mention, within the United States, only 3 states gave their assessments to this latest PISA assessment. And they were Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Florida. So now let's take a look at the assessments that are done locally. I live in the state of Connecticut. And Connecticut has what they call the Connecticut Masteries Test. And they administer this test every spring for grades levels 3 through 8 on the content areas of reading, writing, math, and science for grades 5 through 8 in addition to the other ones. Well, what happens to these scores is when they get to all the scores to put together, they look at where they rank amongst their other districts, and they decide what they need to change in order to bring those rankings up higher for the following tests. What does this do to the teachers in the school system? It means that they have to start teaching to the test. That's not a good way for us to baseline where our kids need to be for our core curriculums. We're teaching them how to answer A, B, C, D. We're not teaching them the basics so that they have a foundation to make their own decisions, to apply that knowledge. They're not getting enough of that. We're rushing through to be able to provide the teaching of that test. Now, I've also included in here, which you'll see in the next slide, a breakdown of all the nations that competed in the PISA testing. Going back to after we do standardized testing and it affects the teachers, the government has asked us to take a look at teacher evaluations. And maybe we need to change how we evaluate our teachers to ensure that we have the better teachers in-house to be able to provide the foundation for these students for their learning. So again, locally, the town of Easton, town of Reading, and Region 9, which are based on the same superintendent of schools, Dr. Bernard Josephsberg, he has asked that we put in a hybrid evaluation. Now, a hybrid evaluation is a combination of many things. One is that the state mandates, state of Connecticut mandates that teachers be evaluated on an annual basis, which Easton has done that, Reading has done that, I'm sure, because we're all in the same district. But being hybrid, our superintendent is asking that we also include the assessment scores of the students in the classroom to ensure that those levels are going up. If they're being raised, that means the teachers are bringing those students up to the core values that we are asking them to do. And they're also, very interestingly, they want to include a parent survey. Now, these are a lot of demands placed on the teachers. But remember, we want the better people in place. These teachers also have to ensure that they're teaching not only just the goals and objectives of every lesson across the board to the classroom in one way, they have to teach to every student at every level. And in our administrative groupings that we do here in Easton, our administrative staff makes sure that they have made modifications to reach those students at those levels. So here I've also included what we need to get to the next point, is why we need a core set of values. We're evaluating our students on global assessments, local assessments, teacher evaluations, but we're not doing it as a nation as a whole. So how are our students going to compete globally if our nation doesn't have a set of values, core values, set for them all together? They need to be on the same playing field. The United States Constitution does not allow the government to mandate what we should or should not do in our education curriculum. Our government is offering to build a foundation, a core set of values, a core curriculum that our states can put in place. President Obama has introduced it. In 2010, there were pilot programs running in different areas. And in one school, one teacher said what they used to complete in a whole class period was maybe a whole section of a book, where today they're only being able to get one paragraph. But regardless of that, asking each state whether they want to be involved or not, 46 states in the beginning said that they would follow suit. And the inception of this program is supposed to happen in the year 2014. But just most recently, as more states continue to drop out, New York is another one that's questioning. And the reason why is because they're looking at costs. And they're also looking at the level that we ranked our students before. Students were ranked very high, may now be ranked at a much lower level. And that interferes with what the parents' value of how their child should be seen in their education. It does. It questions everything that we feel that our children should deserve. But remember, nothing is for free. And this is something that is going to take time for us to implement. And it's going to take years before we see the results that happen. But isn't it better today to implement something that we can base those values on rather than 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 8 years down the road and decide that we didn't do that? And our future leaders are struggling to compete in a global society where other countries are trying to bring their rankings up, and what we're doing is just competing at a local level, sending our scores out to a global level, but not even as a representation of our 50 united states, but as a selected group. We shouldn't be choosing selected groups because we're a nation as a whole. I'm not saying that we should give up all our abilities to control at a state level our education. I'm just saying that we need to consider some set of core values that we're all based upon. And if something works in one state, why not take note to that and implement it in another town, another state, so that we can all benefit? One person's ideas are great. No, they're actually good. A multiple number of people together have more to contribute to the ideas of what we need to make change. We have 50 states that can contribute to making this change. If the implementation of what is currently set is not something that is feasible for all of us, then we need to look to find something together that will work so that our nation can be represented in all nations as being competitive and equally as valuable on the ranking scale to compete as future leaders in America. So please consider having a reform to changing our curriculums to be a core curriculum across all 50 states.